Okay, in this part, I want to talk about the histology of our cardiac muscle. You know that we have three types of muscle in our body. One of them is a skeletal muscle, which is a voluntary muscle. It's under our control. We have a striation, and they are cylindrical in shape. They are elongated, and we call them muscle fibers. And they have more than one nucleus per each cell. And the nuclei are located under the cytoplasmic membrane or sarcolemma. The other type of muscle in our body is called a smooth muscle. The smooth muscles are fusiform in their shape. They don't have any striation. They only have one nucleus, and their nucleus is located in the center of each cell. And the last type of muscle is called cardiac muscle. And in this picture, you can see the shape of cardiac muscle, the structure of cardiac muscle. As you see in this picture, the cardiac muscles shows a striation. So we can see these lines inside the muscle. The cardiac muscles contain one or two nuclei per each cell, as you see here, and the nucleus, or this one, and the nucleus is located in the middle of the cell. The cardiac muscle cell show branching pattern, as you see here. At the end of the muscle fibers, you have branching pattern. And when one cardiac muscle wants to join to the other muscle, you can see a dark line here, which we call it intercalated disc. And intercalated disc is composed of two intercellular junctions. One of them is desmosome, and the other one is gap junction. The desmosome can attach to adjacent cell physically to each other, so the cell cannot detach and separate. And the gap junction is the tiny tunnels between two adjacent cells. And this gap junction is very important for our cardiac muscle because it can transmit the electrical signals in all parts of our heart, and heart can go to contraction at the same time, all parts of the heart. So this intercalated disc is only in our cardiac muscles, and it's very important for our heart function. In this picture, in the next picture, you can see the other cardiac muscles. You have the elongated cells, as you see here. You have the nucleus, one or two. They are located in the center of each cell. You can see a striation in each cell, and also you have branching pattern. Look at here, these cells branch into two parts, into two segments. And this is the characteristic of our cardiac muscle cells. And between the cells, you can see these dark lines. These dark lines represent intercalated disc. And intercalated disc, we have gap junctions and desmosomes. Between the cells, these white parts or paler parts are the connective tissue which we have between the cells. I hope you remember between the muscle fibers, we have endomysium. Endomysium is the areolar connective tissue full of collagen fibers and fibroblasts, and they cover all muscle type cells, smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and skeletal muscles. They can separate muscle fibers from each other, and inside this areolar connective tissue, we have many blood capillaries which can bring oxygen and nutrients for our muscle cells, and they can gather and collect all the carbon dioxide and waste product from the cells. These two pictures were for the microscopic structure of our heart. Now I want to talk about the anatomy of the heart. This is the heart, the anterior view of the heart. And you need to know that for our heart, we have two parts here. And here there are two chambers. They are located in the superior or upper part of our heart. We call them atria. Here we have right atrium, and in this part we have left atrium. And then we have two other chambers in the inferior part of our heart. You can see the right ventricle and left ventricle in this part. We have some landmark for our heart. The first landmark which you need to know is number 20. This tapered part is called apex of the heart. So here you can see the apex of the heart, and here this line which you can see my arrow is called base of the heart. I have the picture of base in the next pictures. So this is the base of the heart, and here we have apex of the heart. The apex of the heart is made up of only left ventricle, and it's pointed toward the left side of our body. You need to know that your heart is located in the mediastinum. The mediastinum is the cavity which we have between two pleural cavity. Let me draw the picture of mediastinum here for you first. Imagine that this is your thoracic cavity. In the thoracic cavity, this part is your diaphragm. D is your diaphragm. Inside the thoracic cavity, you have two cavities. They are located in the right and left side. Here is your right pleural cavity, and in the other side, you have left pleural cavity. So the whole structure, the blue structure is the thoracic cavity. In the thoracic cavity, you have two pleural cavities, right and left. Between these two pleural cavities, you have this narrow part. This narrow part is called mediastinum or mediastinal cavity. And in mediastinal cavity, in the lower part, we have the other cavity. This cavity is the cavity of our heart. It's located here. And this purple structure is called pericardial cavity. So, your heart is located in pericardial cavity. Your pericardial cavity is in the inferior part of your mediastinal cavity. Your mediastinal cavity is between two pleural cavities, and all of them are located in thoracic cavity. So this is the location of your heart. And as you see in my picture, I draw the heart in the middle part of our body. But the apex of the heart, as you see here, is pointed to the left side. Because of that, we can hear the sound of the heart in our left side better than our right side. When we palpate our chest, we can hear and sense the heart beating in left side better than right side. So this is the location of heart. This tapered part is called apex of the heart, and this part is called base of the heart. The base of the heart is located between atria and ventricle, and this base is the location of the blood vessels. The blood vessels go out of our heart or come into the heart. So this is the base and apex of the heart and the location of our heart in pericardial cavity. In the lecture, I talked about pericardial cavity for you. The pericardial cavity has two parts, two layers. One layer is visceral pericardium, and one layer is called parietal pericardium. The visceral pericardium is attached to the heart wall, and parietal pericardium is farther than that. And I will show you the pictures later today. So this is the location of our heart. Now I come back to this picture. This surface is the anterior surface of the heart. In the anterior surface of the heart, we can see the arteries better. Here, this number 7, which is the red blood vessel, is called aorta. Aorta is the largest and the most important artery in our body, which can bring blood in all parts of our body and distribute blood in our body. The aorta has 3 important parts. First, you have number 7. Number 7 is called ascending aorta because it comes up. After that, you have the arch, number 8, which we call it aortic arch, and then we have number 12, which is descending aorta. You can use descending aorta or descending thoracic because it's located in thoracic cavity. Then this thoracic aorta perforates the diaphragm, come to abdominal cavity, and in the abdomen we call it abdominal aorta. This aorta makes many branches in our abdomen to nourish all the organs which we have there. But this descending aorta can bring oxygen and nutrients to the parts which are lower than our heart. What happened to the parts which we have upper than the heart? The parts which we have upper than the heart, like our upper chest, our neck, head, and upper limbs, are nourished by these, 3 branches which we have here, number 9, 10, and 11. The first one from the right to the left are the arteries which I named for you. Number 9 is called the brachiocephalic artery. Number 10 is left common carotid artery, and number 11 is left subclavian artery. They are the branches which come out of our aortic arch, and they can bring oxygen and nutrients to the parts which we have upper than our heart. So in the anterior view of your heart, you can see the aorta, different parts and different branches. The aorta is red in this color because it can carry oxygenated blood for us. The next artery which you can see in the anterior surface is number 6. Number 6 is called pulmonary trunk, but you can see the color is blue. The blue color means that it carries deoxygenated blood, and this is the only artery in our body which carries deoxygenated blood. The pulmonary trunk, it brings the deoxygenated blood to our lung to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, and then the oxygenated blood come back to our heart. Here I should notice that the origin of your pulmonary trunk is right ventricle, and the origin of your aorta is left ventricle. The right side of your heart works with deoxygenated blood, and the left side of your heart works with oxygenated blood. The other things which you can see in the anterior surface is number 5 and number 15. These 2 small pouch or small sacs are the sacs which are attached to our right and left atria. And as you see here, their surface has wrinkles. We call them auricles. We have number 5 as right auricle and number 15 as left auricle. They are small sacs which are attached and suspended to our right and left atrium. The other feature which you have in the anterior surface of your heart is a groove or a sulcus which you have here. This groove or sulcus is called anterior interventricular groove or anterior interventricular sulcus. It's the location of the blood vessels which can nourish the heart wall itself, which we call them coronary arteries and coronary veins. As you see in this picture, we have number 18, which is the anterior interventricular artery, which is located in anterior interventricular groove. And we have number 17 as the great cardiac vein, which is located in anterior interventricular groove. And on both sides of this anterior interventricular groove, you have number 16 as right ventricle and number 19 as left ventricle. For identification of anterior view of our heart, you should pay attention to the presence of auricles. We cannot see the auricles in the posterior view. And also you should pay attention to the presence of aorta and pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk, which is number 6, come out of our right ventricle, then it branched to number 14, left pulmonary artery, which goes to our left lung to exchange gases, and number 13, which is right pulmonary artery, which goes to our right lung to do exchange. The other feature which you can see in this picture is number 1. Number 1 is one major vein in our body, which we call it superior vena cava. The superior vena cava is the vein which drains our head, neck, upper chest, and 2 upper limbs. And it brings the oxygenated blood back to our right atrium. And also in this picture, you can see number 2 and number 3. Number 2 and number 3, both of them are pulmonary veins. One of them is superior and one of them is inferior pulmonary veins. Superior means it's located upper and inferior means it's located lower. And they are the left pulmonary veins because they come out of our left lung. These are the things which we can see in the anterior view of our heart. In this picture, you can see the lateral view or the left view of your heart. In the left view, we have again number 4 as the ascending aorta, number 5 as the aortic arch, and number 6 as the descending thoracic aorta. It comes down in our thoracic cavity. And from the aortic arch, from right to left, we have 3 branches. First, we have brachiocephalic artery, then we have left common carotid artery, and the last one is the left subclavian artery. Then you can see number 7 here. Number 7 is the pulmonary trunk, and the pulmonary trunk makes 2 branches, and you have number 8 because we can see only the left side or the lateral side of the heart, and number 8, left pulmonary artery. Number 10 is your left atrium, and number 9 is the blind pouch or the blind sac which is attached to left atrium, and we call it left auricle. You have number 11 and 12 here, the left superior pulmonary vein and the left inferior pulmonary vein. They are the veins which bring oxygenated blood to our left atrium. Because they carry oxygenated blood, their color is red. The other veins in our body are blue in their color. So the only exception which we have for the color of arteries and veins are the pulmonary artery, which is blue, and the pulmonary veins, which are red. In this picture, you can see the anterior interventricular groove or anterior interventricular sulcus. In this groove, you have number 13, which is the great cardiac vein. This is a coronary vein which can collect the oxygenated blood of the heart wall. And we don't have label for this artery. This is anterior interventricular artery, which can bring oxygenated blood to the wall of the heart. Number 14 is your left ventricle, and number 16 is the apex of the heart. In this picture, you have one number 15. Number 15 can show you the other coronary artery of the heart. It's located in the lateral side of the heart, and we call it circumflex artery. In the lecture, I talked about it completely. The circumflex artery is the branch of left coronary artery. The left coronary artery has two branches. One of them is this circumflex, and the other one is anterior interventricular artery. This picture shows you the posterior view of the heart. In the back of the heart, as I told you before, we cannot see arteries and we cannot see auricles. So this is a key for anterior and posterior view. But in the back of the heart, we can see the veins very clear. Here you can see this vein. It's called superior vena cava, and we don't have number for that. And number 13 is called inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava can collect all the oxygenated blood from the lower part of our heart. The other feature which you have here is number 12, your right atrium, and number 9, which is your left atrium. We have three veins which come to our right atrium. One of them is superior vena cava, one of them is inferior vena cava, and the other one is called coronary sinus. I will show you in the next picture. The coronary sinus is this vein which comes inside the right atrium, and it can bring the deoxygenated blood of the heart wall to the right atrium. The other thing which you have here is the left atrium, and the left atrium can receive oxygenated blood from pulmonary veins. I introduced the superior and inferior left pulmonary veins to you before. Here you can see number 10 and 11, right superior and right inferior pulmonary veins, which bring oxygenated blood from our lungs to, our right lung to the right atrium. In this view, you can see number 5 and 6. They are the branches of our pulmonary artery, right branch and left branch here. In the back of the heart, you can see one other groove here, one other depression. And this depression can hold one artery and one vein. Number 16 is called middle cardiac vein. This is one of the coronary veins which can collect the oxygenated blood of heart wall. And number 17 is posterior interventricular artery. It can bring oxygen to the wall of the heart. And on both sides of this groove, you have number 18 as the right ventricle, and number 15 as the left ventricle. In this picture, you can see one sulcus here. This sulcus is called coronary sulcus. This coronary sulcus can host the blood vessels of the heart. And you can see number 14 and number 19. As you see in this picture, number 19 is very smaller than number 14. Number 19 is called a small cardiac vein because it's small in its size, and number 14 is called coronary sinus. This is a large vein which brings the oxygenated blood of the heart wall to the right atrium. And I told you that here we have the apex of the heart, and this part, which you can see the label, is called the base of the heart. The base of the heart is the place where the blood vessels can come inside the heart or leave our heart. And this is the right view or medial view of our heart. You can see the right atrium and right ventricle better in this picture. Number 2 is your right atrium. Number 6 is the right auricle, which is attached to our right atrium. Number 1 is superior vena cava, and number 5 is the inferior vena cava. Number 12 is your right ventricle, and number 13 is the apex of your heart. We have number 9 here. This number 9 is the right coronary artery. And from the right coronary artery, we have number 10 in the right margin of the heart, and we call it marginal artery. You can see the small cardiac vein as number 11 here. Number 7 is the aorta, the ascending aorta, and number 8 is the pulmonary trunk. Now we open the right ventricle. In the right ventricle, you have different structures. First, I want to show you number 10. Number 10 is a wall, is a septum which separates right ventricle from left ventricle. Here you have right ventricle, and number 11 is left ventricle. In right ventricle, we have some structures. First, you can see number 7. Number 7 are 3 bulge and large muscle in our right ventricle. We call them papillary muscle. The papillary muscle is the site of insertion of these cords, these white cords. These white cords, which is number 5, is called chorda tendini. And the chorda tendini in one side attached to papillary muscle, in the other side they are attached to number 4. Number 4 is tricuspid valve. The valve which we have between right atrium and right ventricle. When this chorda tendini is slack, the valve is open and the blood can come down from atria to ventricle. When these chorda tendini become taut due to contraction of papillary muscle, the valve becomes closed and the blood cannot go back or regurgitate back to our atrium. So here you can see the tricuspid valve or right atrioventricular valve. This is a valve between right atrium and right ventricle. It's attached to chorda tendini, and the chorda tendini come down to papillary muscle. We have tricuspid valve. It means that our valve has 3 cusps. So we need to have 3 papillary muscle in our right side. Inside the ventricle, the surface is not smooth. You can see muscle ridges here, and the muscle ridges are labeled with number 6. We call them trabeculum carneae. Trabeculum carneae or trabeculi carneae is the muscle ridges which we have inside the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, we have the origin of number 9 or pulmonary trunk. In the beginning of pulmonary trunk, we need a valve, and the valve is number 8. We call it pulmonary semilunar valve. In this picture, you can see number 3, which is the right coronary artery. You can see number 2, which is right auricle. You have number 13, which is the aorta, and you have number 1, which is superior vena cava. In the other side, we have the left ventricle. In the left ventricle first, again, you can see the septum. This is the septum or interventricular septum with number 8. In the, with number 6. In the right side, you have number 5, which is right ventricle, and here you have left ventricle. In the left ventricle, again, you can see this papillary muscle. You have number 9, which is bicuspid or mitral valve. The other name of bicuspid or mitral is left atrioventricular valve. It's located between left atrium and left ventricle. We have 2 parts for bicuspid valve, 2 cusps. Because of that, we have 2 papillary muscle in the left side. So we have in the all together, we have 5 papillary muscles in our heart. 3 in right ventricle and 2 in left ventricle. And number 10 shows you the chorda tendineae. Inside the left ventricle, like the right ventricle, we have muscle ridges. We call them trabeculi carneae. The other thing is the apex of the heart, number 12. And as you see here, the apex of the heart is only made up of left ventricle. Right ventricle cannot participate in making. Now I want you to pay attention to the thickness of the wall. Here you can see thickness of the wall in right ventricle, and here you have thickness of the wall in left side. And you see that the left ventricle wall is 3 times thicker than the right ventricle wall. Why? Because the left ventricle wants to go to contraction and send blood to aorta, and aorta wants to move blood in all parts of our body. So it needs more muscle and more force for moving the blood. But the right side of our heart only wants to send blood to lungs, and our lungs are located in the same level of our heart. So it doesn't need that much muscle for sending blood. In the left side, you can see number 8. And number 8 is the valve in the opening of our aorta. We call it aortic semilunar valve. Here you can see number 2, which is pulmonary semilunar valve, and number 1 is pulmonary trunk here. This picture shows you the right atrium, inside the right atrium. Inside the right atrium, we have the opening of three veins. Number 5 is superior vena cava, and you can see its opening here. Number 1 is inferior vena cava, and you can see its opening here. And number 2 is the opening of coronary sinus. We call it ostium of the coronary sinus or opening of the coronary sinus. Between right and left atrium, you can see this part. This is interatrial septum, and in the middle of interatrial septum, you can see number 3. This is the oval depression. We call it fossa ovalis. The fossa ovalis is the remnant of opening between right and left atrium. This opening is open when we were in our mother's body, in our mother's uterus, at the time of fetus or fetal period. Because we don't have any respiration at time, the blood in right atrium can easily go to the left atrium through this opening. After birth, it takes about 1 to 2 months to close this part, and we can see the remnant as a depression. We call it fossa ovalis or oval fossa. And during embryonic phase, we call it foramen ovalis or oval foramen. Foramen means opening. I told you that we have a sac, which we call it auricle, and it's attached to right atrium. This is our auricle, and this auricle, inside this auricle, we have muscle ridges. These muscle ridges are called pectinate muscle, but inside the atrium, the surface is completely smooth. We don't have any muscle ridges here. So the auricle has muscle ridges, but the atrium doesn't have any muscle ridges. And this picture shows you the left atrium. The left atrium has 4 openings. 2 openings from the right, 2 openings for a right pulmonary vein and 2 openings for a left pulmonary vein. Only you can see one of them here. Number 3 and number 4 are right superior and right inferior pulmonary vein. Here you can see the interatrial septum, and you can see fossa ovalis with number 5 from this view or from the left atrium. Number 8 is the mitral valve or a bicuspid valve, the valve which we have between left atrium and left ventricle. And number 1 and 2 are 2 branches of pulmonary arteries, right and left pulmonary artery. Here number 7 is the inferior vena cava, and number 6 is our right atrium, and number 9 is the coronary sinus, the large vein which brings the oxygenated blood of our heart to the right atrium. In this view, you can see the aorta, ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending aorta, and these 3 branches: brachiocephalic, left common carotid, and left subclavian. And here we have pulmonary trunk, right and left pulmonary arteries. In this picture, you see that between the aortic arch and the pulmonary trunk, we have a white structure. We have a ligament. We call it ligamentum arteriosum. This ligamentum arteriosum is the remnant of a shunt or a duct between these two arteries. During embryonic period, we call it ductus arteriosus. It's a duct and it can transport blood from aorta to pulmonary trunk and vice versa. But after birth, it changed to a ligament and the connection between these two arteries are blocked. So we call it ligamentum arteriosum. Here you can see the real picture of our heart in the cadaver. This is the human heart. Here you can see the heart. It's located in this cavity, which we call pericardial cavity. So the heart is enclosed with pericardial membrane. And the outer layer of the pericardium, which is attached to parietal pericardium, is called fibrous pericardium. I talked about it in the lecture completely, and the fibrous pericardium can attach our heart to the neighboring structure like our diaphragm here. You can see right and left lung, they are located in the pleural cavity, and here you can see the remnant of pleural membrane, and the whole structure here is our thoracic cavity. Between these two pleural cavity, this part we have mediastinum, and the mediastinum has heart in the inferior part, and we have the blood vessels, we have trachea, and we have esophagus in the superior. This is the real heart. In this real heart, you can see, this is the anterior view and most right side of the heart. You can see number 8 as the pulmonary trunk and number 7 as the aorta. You have number 4 as the right atrium and number 10 as the right ventricle. You have number 15. This is the apex of the heart. And here you can see anterior interventricular sulcus. And in this anterior interventricular sulcus, you have number 12, which is anterior interventricular artery, and number 11, which is the great cardiac vein. And number 13 is the circumflex artery. The circumflex artery and the anterior interventricular artery originate from this artery, which we call it left coronary artery. Number 6 is the right coronary artery. Right and left coronary artery are the arteries which are originated from our aorta. So you need to know that the aorta first give branches to its heart wall, and then it gives branches to the other part of our body. And number 9 is the branch of right coronary artery, and we call it margin artery. Then you can see the superior vena cava with number 1 and inferior vena cava by number 5. You can see number 2 and 3, they are right superior and right inferior pulmonary veins. They bring oxygenated blood to our left atrium. And here you can see the right auricle. This is the right auricle. This is the back of the heart. In the back of the heart, we cannot see auricles, and we can see most of our veins. Number 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, they are pulmonary veins. Superior and inferior right pulmonary veins, superior and inferior left pulmonary veins. And number 3 is left atrium. In this picture, you can see number 7, this is the ascending aorta. Number 6 is the inferior vena cava, and number 8 is the pulmonary trunk from the other side. Here in this view, you can see coronary sinus, and this part, which is smaller, is a small cardiac vein. Then you can see number 10 as the left ventricle, and number 13 as the number 13 is also left ventricle, 10 and 13, both of them. Number 14 is the apex of our heart, and you can see the posterior interventricular sulcus here, which contain number 12 as the posterior interventricular artery and number 11 as the middle cardiac vein. Here you can see the right side of the heart. In the right side of the heart, you have number 2 as the superior vena cava and number 1 as the pulmonary vein from the right side. You have the cavity of right atrium here, and number 4 is the opening of inferior vena cava here. You have the right ventricle, and you can see the chorda tendini in right ventricle, which come to papillary muscle here, and you can see the tricuspid valve. You have the opening of pulmonary trunk from the right side, which is number 11, which is supported and protected by number 10, which is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Number 9 here is the left ventricle, and number 8 is the apex of our heart. And in the next picture, you can see the other side of the heart. First, you have the interventricular septum, which is located between right and left ventricle. You can see number 8, which is the papillary muscle. You can see the chorda tendinis here with number 9, and you have number 10, which is the bicuspid or mitral valve. You can see the opening of aorta, and number 11, which is the aortic semilunar valve. These are the parts which we have for our heart.